For 7 years she kept the hold alive alone. Then he rode home, and the seal named her his. The morning I rode back into Vane Hold, I counted the wolves. It was the first thing I had always done as a boy, ride in through the canyon gate and count the wolves waiting in the outer pen. A hold's wolves were its temperature. If they were restless, something was wrong with the boarders or the pack. If they were calm, you could breathe. My father taught me that. I had not thought about it in years because there had been no hold to count. Only the front and the mud and the smell of campaign fires burning through 7 winters. I counted 14 wolves along the outer pen wall as I came through the gate. They were all lying down. Not sleeping, watching. The calm, loose-limbed watching of animals that are at ease in their bones. The border wards were intact. I could feel them in the stone of the canyon archway, that faint hum that meant the old moon seal was holding. I did not expect that. The elder Bran had sent word twice in the last 3 years that the seal was in decline, his careful language for something nobody could fix. But the wards felt whole to me, strained maybe, the way an old rope strains under long use, but whole. The reception yard was full. The council had turned out 7 elders in their gray cloaks, the hold's 3 senior wardens, the pack who had stayed rather than march with me to the northern front. Faces I knew, older than I remembered, the way all faces are older when you have been gone too long. They cheered when the canyon gate swallowed my horse's hooves. The sound bounced off stone walls and came back changed, the way echoes always sound like grief and celebration at once. I did not count who was missing. I knew who was missing. The front had taken 31 of mine, and I had carried their names in my chest like stones for 7 years, and I was not going to set them down yet, not in front of the ceremony. I swung down from the saddle and let Elder Bran clasp my forearm. "The hold stands," he said, and there was real relief in his voice, the kind of relief that meant it had been close. "I can feel the wards," I said. "I thought you wrote that the seal was failing." "It was." He looked sideways, something careful in it. "Something changed about 4 years ago. It stabilized. We are not entirely certain why. But it's holding. It's holding." I nodded and let the formal greetings move through their necessary shape. The wardens, the senior pack, the quartermaster with her tally of what we had spent and what had come back. I went through it because it was owed, not because I was present. Some part of me had not yet arrived. The campaign leaves something behind when it ends. The body crosses the canyon gate, but the mind is still somewhere on the northern road, watching for smoke. The seal stone was mounted in the inner wall of the reception yard, carved into the foundation block closest to the gate. My great-grandmother's work, according to the hold's oldest stories, a moon seal keyed to the bloodline, meant to protect Vane Hold against the border-breaking packs that had been a real threat in her time. By my father's era, it was more symbol than function. By my era, it was somewhere between. I had never had to think about it much. It hummed, and the wards held, and I was grateful and inattentive the way the young always are with things that have always worked. I glanced at it as Bran continued his recitation of what had happened in my absence, the hard winter of the 3rd year, the sickness in the eastern pen, the trade agreement with the river pack that had almost collapsed before someone managed to hold it together. I was listening. I was also looking at the seal stone, because it was not behaving the way I expected a straining seal to behave. It was bright. Not the dull amber I remembered from childhood, not the steady, low light of something running on old faith. It was bright the way a fire is bright when it has been fed, warm and alive and certain. "Bran," I said, and he paused mid-sentence with the grace of a man accustomed to kings interrupting. "The seal." "Yes. When you said it stabilized 4 years ago, what changed?" He opened his mouth, closed it again, looked again at that careful sideways angle, the one that meant something he did not quite know how to account for. "We are not certain," he said. I looked at the seal. The seal looked back, which is not a thing stones do, except that this one always had. Who tends the outer wolves? I asked. Bran blinked. The question did not fit the shape of the reunion. You could feel the council arranging their expectation of what I would ask next, and that question was not it. The gatekeeper's daughter, one of the other elders said. Marit, who managed the outer territories, a sharp woman who had always measured value in ledger terms. Saren, she's been out there since her father passed, 3rd year of your campaign. She kept on with the outer pen and the wolf feeding schedule and the gate ward checks, so we allowed it. She hasn't been any trouble. Allowed it. I held that phrase in my mind for a moment, the specific texture of it, the way allowed contained a whole posture toward someone. Not asked, not employed, not thanked, allowed. The outer pen, I said. Across the inner yard, through the stone passage, the small yard on the northwest side. She'll be feeding the afternoon shift. Marit said it the way you direct someone to a storage room. Useful, unremarkable, something that would wait. I said, I'll go. The stone passage between the reception yard and the outer pen was narrow and low-ceilinged, the kind of space that makes you duck even if you don't need to. The afternoon light came through a slot window and fell on the left wall in a bright stripe. I had run through this passage as a boy, because there was a particular wolf in the outer pen that my father would never let me visit except in secret, and I had learned its rhythms. The outer pen smelled of pine-pitch torches and wolf fur and old stone. The smell of Vayne holds bones. She was standing at the far gate of the pen, her back to me, speaking to one of the wolves in the low, unhurried voice that wolves prefer. Not commanding, offering. The wolf's name, I would learn later, was Breck, and he was the oldest of the gate wolves, a gray-muzzled veteran who in my day had been intractable with everyone except my father. He was leaning against the gate post with his chin on the top rail, his eyes half closed, making the specific sound that wolves make when someone is doing something right. She had not heard me come in, or if she had, she gave no sign of it. That particular kind of self-containment that is not performance but habit, the posture of someone who has spent years being the only person in a room and has learned to be complete in it. I stopped inside the passage entrance and looked at her. She was slight, not fragile, but fine-boned in the way of someone who has done hard work for a long time and been pared down to what is essential. Her hair was the color of old oak, loose at the nape, pinned back with what looked like a whittled wolf tooth, one of the keeper's old tools, a fastener for laid ropes. Her dress was practical, gray-brown wool, no embellishment, the sleeves rolled past the elbow. She had flour on her left forearm, which meant she had been in the Hold Bakehouse before this, which meant she had responsibilities in more than one place. No one had mentioned that. She was singing under her breath, half a phrase of something I did not recognize. My wolf went quiet. Not the quiet of attention, though that was part of it. This was a different quiet. The quiet of a thing that has been in motion for 7 years, 7 years of campaigns, of blood on snow, of riding with my wolf always alert in my chest, always listening for the next danger, always on guard. And then, in the space of 10 seconds in a stone pen in the northwest corner of my own hold, had decided that it did not need to be on guard anymore. It was so sudden and complete that it felt like the absence of something rather than the arrival of it, like stepping inside after a long time in the wind. I exhaled. I had not realized I had been holding that particular breath for 7 years. She heard that. The exhale, small as it was, reached her in the quiet of the pen, and she turned. Her eyes were dark, the gray-green of river water in the canyon shadow. They found me immediately, no searching, no startled scan, the way eyes find something they have been expecting without knowing they were expecting it. And something in her face went very still. Not fear, not surprise, something more like the look of someone who has been working on a very long, very difficult problem and has just seen the piece they were missing. The wolf at the gate rail lifted his head. Breck looked at me, looked at her, and then did the thing I had never in my life seen that wolf do. He wagged his tail. "My Lord Aldrich," she said. Her voice was low and even nothing performed. "You're back." "I am," I said. Neither of us said anything for a moment. The afternoon light came over the pen wall in a long slant and caught the side of her face. The gate wolves were watching us, all 14 of them, I realized, arranged along the pen rails in a loose, waiting formation, as if this were a thing they had anticipated. "How long have you been tending them?" I asked. 7 years, she said, "since my father's last winter." "Were you asked?" She looked at me levelly, not formally. "Did anyone thank you?" She did not answer that. She looked back at Breck, who had settled his chin on the rail again, and she scratched behind his ear with the absent ease of long practice, and she said, "Someone had to." That was all she said about it. Someone had to. And something that had been moving toward me for 7 years, or perhaps all my life, I do not know the shape of these things, arrived. I did not go back to the reception yard immediately. I sat on the pen fence and asked her about the wolves. She told me their names, all 14, each one with a history. Breck, the eldest, who had come to her 3 days after her father died and refused to leave her side. Male, the young one, who had been born in the 3rd winter and was something of a troublemaker with the Eastern Gate wards. Finn, the only female in the gate pack, who ran the perimeter checks with a precision that had saved the hold's border integrity twice in the 4th year of my absence. She told me these things in the same even voice, not to impress me, not because I had asked, but because the wolves were her subject and she knew her subjects completely. She was a woman who had been left to herself for 7 years, and had used every one of those years to become excellent at something no one was watching. I asked about the moon seal. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "What about it?" "The elders say it stabilized in the 3rd year, the same year your father passed." She looked at Breck, not away from me, not evasion, but at the wolf, the way she seemed to look at him when she was thinking. "My father used to press his palm to the seal stone every morning," she said. "Part of the gatekeeper's right, he said his father taught him. When he passed, I didn't know if I should. I wasn't the gatekeeper, but the seal had been dimming for a long while and I was frightened." She paused. "So I tried. And it lit." She said it simply. It lit, as if it had simply been waiting for her palm, which I would come to understand it had. "You've been doing it every day since?" I asked. "Every morning before the wolf feeding, a beat. I didn't tell anyone. I wasn't certain it was. I didn't know if anyone would want to hear it from me. Didn't know if anyone would want to hear it from her. 7 years of keeping Vane Hold alive, the wards, the wolves, the seal, without once being asked, without once being thanked, without once being given a reason to believe that her role was anything more than quietly allowed." I looked at her. She was watching the wolves again, her forearms resting on the pen rail, flower still on her left sleeve, her hair coming loose from the wolf-tooth pin. The seal stone was not visible from the outer pen, but I could feel it in the stones of the hold, that warm, certain hum. It had been her. Every morning for 4 years, the hold's protection had been her palm pressed against a cold stone before anyone else was awake. My wolf, which had been quiet since I walked into the pen, did something it had not done in 7 years of war. It lay down. That is not a metaphor. A wolf inside a man's chest does not simply rest. You carry it always, alert, scanning, a second consciousness that never fully sleeps. Even in the safest camps I had known on the northern front, my wolf was always a degree away from standing. 7 years without lying down, without trusting that the ground beneath was safe enough to release into. It lay down in the outer pen of Vane Hold, in the shadow of 14 gate wolves and one woman with flower on her sleeve, and it did not get up. I understood then, not the way I would understand it later formally in front of the council, but the way you understand a thing that was always true. She was mine. She had been mine before I left for the northern front. She had been mine while I was gone. The hold had known it, The seal had recognized it in her blood, and the wolves had known it, and everything except me and the council and 7 years of inattention had known it. I said her name. Saren. She turned. Something in how I said it, the way a name sounds when it is finally understood as what it is, made her go very still. Yes, she said. Come back through with me, I said. There's something I have to show the council. I have thought about what it looked like, walking back through that stone passage. I was at the front of the hold's formal return, the king back from 7 years of war, and I was coming in not from the ceremony yard but from the back passage, from the outer wolf pen, with a gatekeeper's daughter at my side and flower on her sleeve. The 2 senior wardens who had come to find me discreetly, because the council was waiting, stopped at the passage entrance and said nothing. They looked at me, and then at her, and then at me again, with the specific look of people reassembling their understanding of what is happening. I walked past them. She walked beside me. She did not look at the wardens. She had learned 7 years ago not to look for approval in faces that did not offer it. The reception yard was exactly as I had left it, the elders in their gray cloaks, the pack arranged behind them, the late afternoon light going golden on the hold's stone walls. Bran was speaking to one of the younger wardens in a low voice. He stopped when he saw me come through. They all stopped. The moon seal was in the wall behind Bran's left shoulder. Even from across the yard I could see it, the same warm, certain light that I had noticed when I first rode in, the light that had made me ask about the wolves. I crossed the yard. Not toward Bran, toward the seal. I heard the council's attention shift, that particular silence of a group of people recalibrating, trying to determine what they are witnessing. Bran said, "My lord," and I did not stop. When I reached the seal stone, I turned to Saren. She had followed me without question, her face composed, her eyes clear. "Your palm," I said quietly, "the way you do it each morning." She looked at me for a moment, not uncertain, but checking that I understood what I was asking for. Then she turned to the seal, lifted her right hand, and pressed her palm against the carved stone. The seal blazed. Not the steady, warm light it had been all day, that had been its resting state, what she kept it at day after day through patient maintenance. What blazed now was the seal at full recognition, a surge of gold-white light that poured out of the stone and up the wall and across the reception yard like a wave, like the hold's foundation exhaling a breath it had been holding for 7 years. Every wolf in the outer pen howled, a single long note, unplanned, perfect. Several of the elder council took a step back. Bran's mouth was open. I put my hand over hers on the seal, not to direct her, she did not need direction, to make visible what was already true. Where our palms met on the stone, the light doubled, and I felt my wolf rise in my chest for the first time since the outer pen, not to stand guard but to recognize, to say this, her, yes. The seal stone had not done this in living memory, not when my father pressed his palm to it, not when his father did, not in anyone's account in the hold's written histories. The moon seal responded to bloodline, to the blood of the hold's destined keeper, and it had been dimming slowly since before my great-grandmother's line had thinned. It should not have responded to her. Unless she was the answer to the thinning. Unless the seal was not a simple inheritance of blood, but a recognition of the one whose blood had always been meant to complete the hold's bond. The one whose blood had been his mate's blood, waiting. I released the stone and turned to face the council. "Her name is Saren," I said, "gatekeeper's daughter. She has tended the outer wolves for 7 years and kept this seal burning for 4 of them, every morning before the hold woke. The wards you have been crediting to old faith and the stone's own stubbornness. They have been her work. Every winter the hold did not fall, every border breach that did not cross, every wolf that came back from the perimeter healthy and accounted for, that was her." The yard was very quiet. Bran said slowly, "We didn't know." "No," I said, "you allowed her, there's a difference." Merit to her credit, did not look away. She looked at Saren, really looked, perhaps for the first time, and then she looked at the seal, which was still glowing, and then she looked down at her hands. "My lord," Bran began, gathering himself, because Bran was a man who always gathered himself. This will require formal." "I know what it requires," I said. "I know the rights." I looked at Saren. "Do you want them? The formal recognition, the naming, I'll stand by you through all of it. Or we do it now simply in front of the witnesses we have, and I settle the formal records in the morning." She considered me. She had been considered by no one in 7 years, and she was deliberate with it, taking the question seriously, the way someone does who has had to carry their own decisions without consultation for a long time, and is careful about the weight of a decision now that someone else is offering to share it. "Now is better," she said. "I'm tired of waiting." There were a few people in the yard that I believe actually flinched at that. The quiet honesty of it, "I'm tired of waiting," the 7 years of patience it contained without calling itself patience. I turned to the assembly. Before the hold and its pack, before the seal that has recognized her blood and the wolves that have kept faith with her through 7 winters, I name Saren as the hold's true keeper, bound to Vayne by blood right confirmed. I name her my fated mate, by the bond that the seal has witnessed this day, and I ask her in front of you all to stand beside me. The formal words, not improvised, these were the hold's old words, the ones used in the founding histories that I had read as a boy and never expected to use. They had a weight to them that the simple words do not. You felt them in the stone. I held out my hand to her. She looked at it. The yard was very still, everyone waiting, the wolves quiet in the pen beyond the passage, the seal still running its gold light along the wall. She put her hand in mine. The seal blazed again, a third pulse, different from the recognition pulse, different from the maintenance glow. Deeper, settled. The sound a fire makes when it has found the right fuel and intends to burn for a long time. Several of the hold's older pack members made a sound I had not heard in my lifetime, a low collective note, part agreement, part acknowledgement, part something that does not have a word in any language I know. The sound of a hold naming its keeper for the first time in its memory. The council bowed. Not one by one, together. Bran first and then the others, finding the angle from him the way a flock finds direction. Merritt bowed, and I will say this about her. She bowed without qualification. Shoulders down, head forward, the full bow of recognition, and not the half measures of people who are still deciding how much to mean it. Saren did not look at them, she looked at me. We stood in the reception yard as the light finished changing and the torches were lit. Someone, I did not see who, brought her a cloak. Not her own gray-brown wool, one of the hold's formal cloaks, dark blue with the wolf-tooth clasp. She accepted it with the same even patience she seemed to bring to everything, and she settled it around her shoulders, and she looked at me with that river-water gray-green gaze and said, "You're going to have to tell me about the North." "I will," I said, "all of it." "And the 31. I looked at her. "You know about them." "Word comes even to the outer pen," she said. "I kept their names too. I have them written down. 7 years in the outer pen with 14 wolves, keeping a seal burning alone, writing down the names of the dead in a campaign she could not go to, keeping faith with a hold and a king who were not keeping faith with her, because it was the right thing to do, and she was the kind of person who did the right thing regardless of witness. I said, "I will tell you everything, but first there's something you should understand." "What?" "The seal recognizes the hold's keeper and the keeper's mate, not separately, together. The wards will be stronger now. What you've been maintaining at 1/2 strength, that's what we'll have at full." She absorbed this. "That's why it blazed when you put your hand over mine." "Yes." She was quiet a moment. Then, practical to the bone, "Then you should press your palm to it every morning too." I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed since I did not know when. The sound of it surprised me, surprised several nearby pack members who had never, I suspected, heard their king laugh out loud in the reception yard. Breck, somehow, had gotten out of the outer pen and was sitting at the passage entrance watching us, and his tail moved once at the sound. "Yes," I said, "I'll press my palm every morning." "Good," said Saren. "Then the hold will be all right." We did the formal records in the morning, as I had promised, the seal witness statement, the blood right recognition, the naming right that the hold's oldest records outlined in careful script. Bran oversaw it with the meticulous attention of a man who understood that what he was writing would be read for a long time and wished to have his role in it be one he could look back on without shame. I gave him that grace. He had run the hold in good faith for 7 years. He had allowed Saren, yes, and that allowing carried what it carried, but he had not driven her out, and the holding together of the hold in my absence owed something to him as well. Merritt came to the outer pen that afternoon, unannounced, alone, which was not her habit, and stood at the rail and watched Saren move through the feeding routine. She watched for a while. Then she said, "How did you learn the gate ward checks? Your father never taught you." Saren looked up from the feed measure. "I asked the old Warden Fenn before he passed. 3rd year. I thought if no one else was doing them, I should learn." Merritt said, "You could have come to the council." "I did," Saren said pleasantly, without accusation. "Twice. The first time I was told the outer pen wasn't the council's concern. The second time I was told to speak to the gate warden. There was no gate warden by then." Merritt was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I owe you a formal accounting." "No," Saren said, "the hold is accounted, that's what matters." Merritt left without saying anything further. But the next morning, before the seal pressing, Saren told me Merritt had sent a formal letter to the hold's record keeper requesting that Saren's gatekeeper duties be logged retroactively. Every year, every duty, every wolf census and ward check and morning seal maintenance, from the first day after her father's death to the present. Retroactively. 7 years entered into the formal record that should have been there all along. "You didn't need to tell me that," I said. "No," Saren said, "but I thought you'd like to know she did it before you asked her to." I had not asked her to. I had intended to. Saren had saved me the conversation. The way she seemed to have the habit of handling things before they became problems, quietly, without credit, because that was what she did. The hold changed in that first month. Not dramatically, not in the way of reforms and announcements and the visible machinery of governance. In the way that things change when the thing that was always true is finally visible. The gate wolves had always known Saren. The seal had always known her. The pack, slowly, in the gradual way of people recognizing something they should have seen, began to know her too. Breck followed her through the inner yard now, not just the outer pen. He was not supposed to. The inner yard was the province of the hold's formal wolf guard, and Breck was a gate wolf, outer territory. But when I was informed of this breach of protocol, I listened to the report and then said, "Where is Breck now?" And the warden said, "At the entrance to the council chamber, sir, sleeping." And I said, "Then I suppose that's where a gate wolf goes now," and that was the end of that. Mael, the young troublemaker of the eastern gate wards, was brought to Saren after the 3rd time he'd managed to disrupt a border check through sheer exuberant lawlessness. She spent 2 hours with him in the outer pen. He was calm by the end. When the warden came to collect him, Mael looked at Saren and then at the warden and then back at Saren, and Saren said, "He'll be better at the eastern ward if you pair him with Finn. She'll steady him." And the warden said, "Finn's a female gate wolf. They don't generally run patrol together." And Saren said, "They will," and they did. And Mael ran the eastern ward for the next 3 years without incident. These were small things. I tell them because they were her, the texture of how she moved through the hold, how she handled what was in front of her, how she thought about the living things in her care. She had been doing all of this in the outer pen, invisible, for 7 years. The only difference now was that I could see it. I pressed my palm to the seal every morning as promised. She pressed hers at the same time, our palms side by side on the carved stone. The light that came off the seal in those mornings was not the blazing gold of the recognition day. It was steadier, warmer, the light of something running at its full intended capacity after years of running at half. The wards were stronger by the end of the first month. The border check wolves came back reporting cleaner lines. The East Canyon approach, which had been a recurring problem for 6 years, held clean through 2 full lunar cycles. My great-grandmother built this for 2 palms, I told Saren one morning after the pressing, looking at the seal. I don't think she specified whose. She might have, Saren said. If the old records go back far enough. They might. I'll have Bran look. He'll find it, she said, with the confidence of someone who had a clear view of Bran's capabilities. He's thorough when the subject interests him, and this will interest him. Bran found it 6 weeks later, a notation in the founding records in my great-grandmother's own hand in the old script that Bran had to have a scholar translate. The seal is sealed for 2, the keeper and the keeper's heart, each sunrise without end, until the hold stands no longer, and beneath that smaller. I said it for the mate I had not yet found when I was young because I believed in the idea of it. Whoever reads this, I hope you found them. Bran brought the translation to us at the outer pen where we happened to be walking the evening check with Finn and Mael. He read it aloud. He was a formal man and he read it formally, and then he folded the paper with equal formality, and his voice when he said, "My lord, my lady," was entirely steady, and only his eyes gave him away. Saren took the paper from him and read it herself. I watched her face, that composed, self-contained face that had learned, over 7 years alone, not to show too much to a yard full of people who weren't looking. But we were in the outer pen, just the 2 of us and Bran and the wolves and the evening light, and there was no yard full of people, and she let herself read it twice, and then she folded it again along Bran's original crease with great care. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said she was right to believe in it. The formal Luna naming ceremony was held at the turn of the first month in the main yard at noon, the way the hold's traditions required. The full pack attended, not just the elders and the wardens but the outer pack members, the kitchen staff, the wolf tenders, the border runners, everyone who had been in Vane Hold for 7 years while I was away. Many of them knew Saren already, from the outer pen, from the gate ward mornings, from the quiet years she had moved through the hold's outer edges without anyone of formal rank thinking to introduce her. I walked the traditional entry with her. The hold's pack stood in formation along both sides of the main yard. The seal stone, visible in the far wall, was running its full morning warmth. The wolves were quiet. We stopped before the assembly. I said the holding over words, the formal claim, the bond witnessing, the name of the hold offered as shelter and home. And when I said her name, Saren, I said it the way it had been said by no one of rank in 7 years. Completely, without qualification, as if it were simply the most important word in the world, which it was. Then she said mine. That was not traditional. Traditionally the Luna received the naming, she did not return it. But Saren was not a woman much concerned with what tradition required of her in directions she hadn't chosen, and when I offered her the floor to speak, she said my name back to me, Aldrich Vane, in the same quiet, certain voice she used for the wolves, the voice that said, "I know you, and I am not afraid, and this is real." The pack did not bow all at once this time. They bowed in a wave, the elders first, then the wardens, then the pack moving back from the front, a slow roll of recognition, the way a stone moves water. Merritt bowed. The young wardens who had not known Saren at all bowed. Even the kitchen staff, who had come to stand at the yard's edge and watch, bowed, because the moment was one of those that requires it without asking. Breck pushed through the assembled pack and sat at Saren's left heel, which was not traditional either, but which was Breck, and no one argued. Saren looked at me, and for a moment, just a moment, the length of a breath, she looked the way you look when you have been holding something very heavy for a very long time and someone has just offered to take the other side. Not relieved exactly. Not weakened. Just accompanied. Just not alone anymore. Then she straightened, and she was Saren again, composed, clear-eyed, equal to whatever came next, and I thought, 7 years. She carried this hold for 7 years, and she did it without bitterness, and she did it without asking for thanks, and she did it because it needed to be done. There is no word in the languages I know for that quality exactly. The closest I have found is fidelity, though that word is usually used for the keeping of vows, and she had made no vow. She simply kept faith with a thing that could not keep faith with her in return. I had gone to the north and fought for 7 years and come back changed. She had stayed and kept the hold and come into herself changed. We were not the same people who would have met before the campaign. We were the people who had been made by what we did when no one was watching, and we were, as the seal had apparently always known, exactly right for each other. There is a thing I do now, every morning, that I did not do before the war. I wake before the hold wakes. I walk the inner yard in the dark, not the formal inspection walk, not the warden's perimeter route, but a different walk, quieter. The gate wolves hear me coming and make their sounds, not alarm but greeting. Breck is usually at the passage entrance already, because he seems to hear me before I make any sound, the way he apparently heard Saren for 7 years without anyone knowing. I go to the seal stone in the inner wall. I press my palm. And then she comes, not because I summon her, because I do not summon her, because she wakes at the same time with the same instinct, and we meet at the stone the way the hold's founders met at whatever stones they used. Our palms together. The light that comes off the seal in that moment is the warmest light I have seen in any latitude, warmer than campaign fires, warmer than the noon ceremony, warmer than celebration. It is the light of something that has been waiting and has found what it was waiting for and intends to continue. She still checks on Male and Finn in the afternoon. She still knows all 14 wolves by name, 21 now, because the East Canyon litter arrived in the second autumn, and she named every one of them in consultation with the old gatekeeper's records her father had left, matching names to their markings with the same careful attention she brought to everything. She still reads the old founding histories, when she has an hour for it, looking for things that will help her understand what she is keeping. She is not the same woman who pressed her palm to a cold stone in the dark before anyone was awake, alone, without witness, because it needed to be done. She is more, not in the way of having been changed by ceremony, but in the way of having been seen. There is a difference between what you are when no one is watching and what you are when someone is watching, and it is exactly what you hoped, and she has found that difference, and so have I. The hold stood for 7 years on her faith. I intend to make certain it stands for every year after on both of ours. Every morning before the light comes, 2 palms on the cold stone, and the seal blazing gold, and 14 wolves quiet in the outer pen, and Saren's hand certain in mine. That is Vane Hold. That is what we built between us, across 7 years of distance and 1 morning of return. And if you ask me, a king who has seen wars and borders and the particular cruelties that pacts and councils and long absences can inflict on the ones who simply stay, if you ask me what it looks like, when a thing is exactly right, it looks like that. It looks like her hand in mine on a stone that was waiting.